Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 96, and in this one, we're going to be diving into how to scale a six-figure web design agency. For this talk, I wanted to bring in somebody who is very in the weeds on this because she's doing this herself. My guest in this episode is actually a repeat guest who was just recently on the podcast. This is Avani Miriyala. I had her on recently on episode 84, and we talked about hiring designers and freelancers. And what was interesting is we were actually supposed to talk about this subject in scaling a six-figure web design business, but we actually just ended up focusing on hiring in that episode. So I wanted to bring her right back on to really talk about this and get into the weeds. And man, you can tell that Avani is super passionate about this, and just kind of a FYI, she's actually scaling her business to seven figures right now. So I wanted to bring somebody on who knows a lot about how to scale at the six-figure level. So for those of you who are advanced freelancers and are growing a team, or maybe you're a design agency and you're really ready to take things to the next level, this is going to be your episode. And I should say too, even if you're just starting out and you just want to scale on a very micro level, even if it's just with a couple part-time subcontractors, you're going to pull so much great info from this episode. Avani really gets into the weeds on how to practically scale, because you'll often hear about growth and scaling and team building and revenue and sales and all this stuff. But sometimes I find it really hard unless I hear practical examples of how to actually scale and the kind of the steps you need to take to do so. And that's exactly what we cover in this episode. She's going to lay out a proven path for you to follow and you can implement right now to scale, again, no matter where you are in your business. So I'm really, really excited to hear how this one helps you out. And it was awesome having Avani right back on the show. Now, before we dive in, one thing we talk about is, in order to scale effectively, one thing you need to have in place are really solid processes that are easy to follow and that you can teach your team to run with. And I have a web design process course for those of you who are running your web design agencies and you just feel like your web designs are just a mess. They're taking forever. The process is scattered. There's really no clear checklist to follow. My web design process course is going to be the exact guide that you need to be able to launch your websites successfully, and even before that, plan and build them, because planning is the first step in a web design process, building is the second, and launching it is the third. And that's exactly what my web design process course will enable you to do. It's my 5-phase, 50-step in-depth process, and I would love to help you and your agency have your web design process down before you start to scale. So check that out today. It's open right now for you to join. There'll be a link in the show notes to join that today. All right, guys, without further ado, I want to welcome back Avani Miriyala, who was super passionate in the last episode about hiring, but even more so passionate about scaling. Without further ado, let's dive in. Avani, welcome right back onto the podcast. It's good to have you back on again, my dear.
Thank you. So good to be here, Josh, and great to see you after, a month and a half?
Yeah, it hasn't been that long. It's funny because I had you on episode, I think it was 84. Yeah, 84 you were on, and we were originally going to talk about scaling, more specifically scaling a six-figure design business, but we ended up basically just talking about hiring, which was a great episode. I got so much great feedback, but we really went straight into just hiring on that one. So I wanted to have you right back on to, in fact, talk about scaling, because now that we've talked about hiring, I really want to dive right into scaling. It's been a hot topic for a lot of my audience and a lot of my students and Web Design Club members. A lot of people are now taking that next step to delegate and to scale. And I'm really excited to pick your brain about your experience, because I know you do have a lot of experience in this. So before we dive in, can you just refresh my audience who maybe didn't hear that episode, where you're based out of and what you do now exactly?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, scaling is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'm so excited to dive into the topic today. My name is Avani. As Josh said, I am based out of Austin, Texas. I run a UX and product design agency called AMSD, and it's been almost 4 years, which is crazy to think about. That feels like a lifetime, especially when you're running a business. Feels like You've been doing it forever, even if it's been like 5 minutes. So really, really grateful for my amazing team and everything we've done. This is a big year for us. We are doubling once again. So kind of putting all of these scaling concepts into effect one more time to scale even more. So it's a really great time to talk about it. I also talk about helping freelancers improve their mindset and scale for 6 figures and beyond. So I love talking about anything regarding mindset, the brain. I really believe everything starts in our brains. So I'll probably talk about some of those things here and there throughout the conversation today, but that's a quick snapshot of who I am and what I love chatting about.
Well, and that's what's really cool is when you scale, I've found, and you have a lot more experience with scaling than I do, but either way, I've found you can do it on a small, like micro level, or you could do it on a very big macro level. I know, and you told me last time that your goal is to hit 7 figures this year. So most of my audience isn't there yet, but a lot of my audience are in the $50,000 to $75,000 to 6 figures range, and now they're ready to scale. Once you get to that point as a solopreneur, I always recommend getting stuff off your plate because you can only take your business so far in any industry as one person. At some point, you really need to automate things and delegate and to free yourself up to do what you want to do. And I love that because you can scale on a smaller level or a bigger level like you've talked about. So I'd like to start out with when you know it's time to scale, because I know this depends on the person, whether they've scaled before, whether they are business minded, or in my case, I was a solopreneur who didn't even know I wanted to start my own business. I just kind of fumbled my way into it. So I delayed scaling for like 6 years. I went way too long as a solopreneur, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed doing a lot of stuff myself, but I was also a rare kind of person who could wear every hat and stay sane doing it. Most people I find should probably be quicker to scale. And it's hard for web designers, my audience, because we're used to doing the tech stuff. So we feel like, well, why hire out web designer? Why hire out the tech stuff? Because I can do that and do the sales and run the business. So that's the first question I have for you, Avani, is when do you know it's time to scale?
This is very interesting because as designers, web designers, even developers, we in some ways are in a unique place because we can figure it all out.
I was just going to say we're our own worst enemies probably,
yeah,
right?
I was going to use a different word, but I don't want to use a negative word because I think like we're very talented people, a group of people, the way we think is really special. And because of that, we're really good at a lot of things. We know how to figure it out. So there's this tendency to think that you don't need to scale, or that you think you are not ready, or you don't need to, or I could do it myself. A lot of times in this industry, we come across perfectionists. I myself was one. And I would always be like, oh, don't want to teach someone to do this. It's going to take me forever. I'd rather just do it myself and do it in 5 minutes. But we'll talk about that. I think that's a mindset thing we can touch on later. But most of the time, I think if you're a designer, a web designer, or even a developer who runs an agency, or you're just doing it on your own, you're doing it by yourself right now, you're probably should want to scale sooner than you think. And let me tell you why. The moment you come across a task or something in your business that you dislike, that feels like it's draining your energy, that feels like you're procrastinating, that's a signal that you're doing something that one could be handed off to someone else. And maybe your zone of genius isn't that thing. Maybe you should be focusing on something else that is more money making, or brings in a higher ROI, or even brings you more joy. So that's the way I look at it, is the moment you feel like, and whenever I can talk about this little rating system I use to figure out what to hand off to other people. We can talk about that as well. Yeah. But the moment you start to realize that you're like, oh, someone else should be doing this. Why am I doing this? You're feeling those like heavy feelings of dread and procrastination, or like, I'd rather poke a needle in my eye than do this. When you feel those feelings, it's time to consider scaling. And that doesn't mean you need to run an agency. It doesn't mean that at all. It could just mean extend your time, give yourself a little bit of peace of mind and a little bit more happiness so you can go live your life. Because why did we leave our jobs to do this? Why did we start these businesses? Because we wanted to have our business support us and not the other way around.
Yes. Well said. That's so great. Yeah. That was for me. I have in me, I am a blue collar guy at heart. I can put my work boots on and get something done. It's the job. I was a cabinet maker before I was into design. I'm just a blue collar guy at heart, which has served me really well, but it has also been a bit of an Achilles heel for me because instead of hiring stuff out years before, I would just do it myself. I would just say, you know what, this is part of the gig. I just got to do it. And I would sit there for 2 hours and do something that I dreaded, or even more important than that, I just wasn't well suited for. So now, as a full-blown web design entrepreneur, which is what I call myself now, I am very quick to delegate stuff. Just yesterday, or actually this week, I hired out some Zapier work that integrated a lot of stuff and automated stuff between MailChimp and my web design club. I tried to figure it out myself, and the old Josh would have just kept on going. I would have blown 10 or 15 hours just figuring this stuff out. Now I just talked to my network and my club and I said, hey guys, who's good at Zapier? I don't want to figure it out. If somebody knows how to do this, I'll pay and we'll do it. And I did it and they did it in like an hour and it was awesome. And it freed me up to work on the high level stuff. So that's a great point. Tasks that you hate or maybe that you're not well suited for. I think that's a good red flag to watch out for. But here comes the next step is figuring out those tasks. Like what are the tasks that are worthwhile handing off? And I think sometimes it's hard as a new designer or a new entrepreneur to figure out what's most valuable because they're all valuable tasks. But at the end of the day, there are $100, $1,000, $10,000 an hour tasks, and then there are $5 to $10 an hour tasks. So yeah, what's the rating system you have in place to help us decipher what we need to decide to hand off?
This is great. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and I'll see if I can explain it. I would love to draw it out, but we're on a podcast, so I can't really do that very easily. So the way I like to describe it is list out everything. So let's say you're a solopreneur right now. I recommend listing out every single thing you're doing in your day. Do it for a week so you get like a good snapshot of all the activities you do and list them all out. Then make a ranking. We're going to have two rankings assigned to each activity. Number one is how crucial is this to your business? And you can choose if it's like a scale of 1 to 10 that feels easy for you. That's probably the best thing to start with. You could do a scale of 1 to 100 if you want, but it doesn't really matter. So how crucial is that activity to your business? So let's say the activity is writing captions for Instagram, picking something out of thin air. Also, it's a really good example because I see a lot of people do this. So writing captions for Instagram. Let's say I spend 3 hours a week doing this. So I say the ranking for how crucial is this to my business. The way I'm going to decide how crucial it is to my business is I'm going to look, has that activity produced results for me in the last 6 months? So let's say I spend 3 hours a week doing this Instagram curation / caption writing. And I've been doing it for 6 months and I've gotten 0 clients from that. I think it's crucial because people say like social media, have a presence, do this, do that. But actually how crucial is it to my business is close to 0. So I write that task out or write that number. So I'm writing a 0. And then the second column is how much do I want, I don't know how to phrase this. How much of my time does it need? In this case, right now it's needing 100% of my time. And you could even add a third column that is, how much do I want to do it?
Oh, okay. That's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Where's the desire? Yeah.
So let's say it's a 0. So let's say it's 0, 10. So 0 for the value it brings to my business, 10 for how much of my time it needs because it's taking a lot of my time. It's taking, so right now, a lot of things are going to be 10 because you're a solopreneur, right?
Yeah.
You're the only person doing it. we could rank that in a different way. You could say, like, what percentage of my time does it take? And then that gives you even a finer granular way to rank it. And that could be really good. So if it's 3 hours a week, maybe it's 3 out of 40, let's say 10% of my time or 8% of my time. So you can do it that way as well. And then the last number is, how much do I like doing it? I don't like doing it. I hate doing it. It's 0. So you could probably cross that off your list completely, drop it from your activities, and nothing would happen to your business. So there's going to be 2 types of things we're going to be cutting things out of what you're doing on a day-to-day. And you're also going to be seeing what can you get off of your plate. So there's 2 pieces to it, because a lot of times we are doing things we don't need to be doing. We think we need to be doing them, but we don't need to be doing them. So that's the first example. You're
talking about stuff that could potentially be dropped completely, right? Versus stuff that you just want to get off your plate or need to get off your plate.
Like, you're putting it on a chopping block, you're chopping it off your list. You will not revisit that until you do like a 6-month or yearly planning. And you're like, okay, let's come up with a new strategy. Like, if it's not producing results, 1, you might be doing it wrong. So you need a new strategy, or 2, you just don't need to be doing it at all. So,
and I think even maybe a third one in there is you don't need it anymore. I know that's how I felt when I ran my web design agency. I did print work for a long time, and it was great in the beginning because it opened up a lot of doors. And I encourage my students, if you have some secondary services, that's fine. But as soon as they become costly, drop them. As soon as you don't need them, get rid of them, because I held on to my print stuff way too long. I think we may have talked about this in our last interview, Avani, but I remember having website jobs that were $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that were sitting on the sideline because I'm sitting here working on a $250 business card. And I realized, it dawned on me, I could hire this out, but then what am I going to make? $50 on a business card when I have a $5,000 website that needs to be worked on. And that's when it dawned on me that I just need to chop this off. And it's going to be hard. It was weird telling people that I'm not doing print work anymore or graphic design, but that was a game changer for me. So I definitely want to echo that for everybody. And yeah, because there's a time. I think it's a good way. I never thought about it, but there's kind of 3 tasks that will likely help us scale. Stuff that we shouldn't do at all, like you mentioned, that just can be gone. Stuff that we don't need anymore, that can be gone. And then stuff that we just don't like doing, that we need to get off our plates.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And so I want to give another example. That what you mentioned is a really great example. I want to give one more example. So let's say I am a web designer who has been doing everything, and the task I'm looking at right now, like the activity I'm looking at, is development. Like, let's say WordPress implementation. Let's be really specific about it. WordPress implementation. So the first column is the ranking of how crucial it is to my business. I run a web design agency, 100. It's really important to my business. How much of my time has it been taking? So that's the second column. It's been requiring, let's say, 70% of my time, because I've been like going through bugs, I'm implementing, maybe 60 to 70%. I'll just rank it as like a 6 or a 7. And then the third column, how much do I love doing it? I would rank it a 1. I really don't like it. I love designing, but I don't like implementing very much. And by the way, personally for me, implementing is a 0. And we cut it out of our business, and we have like, that's another conversation. But personally, for me, it's a 0. So let's say it's a 1 for in this example that we're talking about. But it's really important to the business. It's taking quite a bit of my time, and I'm not able to do money-making activities like writing scopes or writing proposals, like having calls with potential clients. So that item can be something you pick off, and it's definitely contained, like implementation for WordPress, definitely well contained, right? You can pick it off and you can say, I can start by outsourcing and getting a developer to help me out with this.
Yes.
So I'm giving you just like one-off examples here. My recommendation is to do this holistically. Make that full list, make a chart for yourself, do it on a whiteboard, do it on a spreadsheet, do it on a piece of paper, and rank those columns. Then go through, and I start working from that rightmost column, which is how much do I want to do it, and start with the zeros. see like, is that thing actually needed? Like, is the crucial quality to my business? How much is it needed in my business? Is that a 0 too? If that is, potentially cut it out. If it's higher, if it's like 5 to 10, okay, this is really important. And then the next question is it something someone else can do? WordPress implementation is definitely something someone else can do. If I give them the guidance, if I give them a design and specs, they can do it, right? So I'm trying to, after I make the whole list, do the rankings, now I'm going in and basically triaging the list and working one by one. And you'll be able to identify a handful or more than a handful of things you can start getting off of your plate and getting someone else to help you with.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, is the first step to scaling. You can then take that, because you're going to get that off your plate, you go hire a contractor to do WordPress implementation. Wow. I now have 20 plus, like maybe 25 hours a week extra to do other things. Like, imagine how much more you could do now. You could just not work. You could go get more clients. You could work on some other parts of your business that actually bring you joy. So that's really the benefit of offloading these tasks off of your plate. And maybe, like, I know development prices really range. They're a big range. It can be anywhere from, like, I've seen like $25, $30 an hour to even more than that, 100 plus. So depending on what it is, it's definitely a big range. But if let's say $50 an hour, pick that. I'm paying $50 an hour, 20 hours a week, 1,000 hours, $1,000 a week. And I use even 5 of those hours to get new contracts. Let's say I close one $5,000 contract or even $3,000 contract. I just gave myself the ability to add $2,000 more dollars or $5,000 more dollars onto my plate, onto my revenue.
There's the key. That's just what I was thinking. And I found that to be true when I started scaling my business. I suddenly had more time to get more clients, to do more marketing. Well, for me, quite honestly, because I had already started my personal brand and doing courses, I was able to focus on that as opposed to putting it back into my business. But for the person who is running their agency, all of your time back, you can do however you want. You can, first of all, you can work a lot less if you want. Instead of working 60 hours a week, you could work 40 or 35. I really encourage my students to work 30 to 35 because generally if you're working 40 hours, you should be able to get done in 30 to 35, what you do if you scale like we're talking about. The other aspect of that I think is really important that I really was thinking about as you were talking there, Avani, is even if it's a task you enjoy, it still might be worthwhile and more cost effective by handing that off. And it looks like you were probably going to allude to that because for me, I just recently, and actually based off of some interviews that are going to be upcoming after this episode that I've already done, really encouraged me to get podcast editing off my plate. It's something that I enjoy. I actually really enjoy podcast editing. I crank some tunes, I go for it. But at the end of the day, I realized if I'm spending 3 hours a week editing a couple episodes, that's 3 hours for me that I could be making new courses or supporting my members or students or creating more free resources or researching or learning. Like, there are more high level tasks that I know only I can do that I need to focus on. And that's the mindset I want to encourage everyone to have with this, because I was even thinking as a web designer, let's say let's say 5 hours a week that you could potentially offload for somebody else to do some of the design and the implementation, even if it's costing you a few $100 or whatever. That may sound really costly. It's like, oh, a few $100, that's scary. But what if you had 5 hours a week extra to email past and current clients and do upsells and connect with clients and make really good relationships and sell more? Like you just said, I mean, you might make several $1,000s instead of just, that 300 that you would have saved. So it definitely, I know it can be scary for people, but it's so worthwhile. And I actually want to ask you the same question that I've asked a couple guests that are going to be coming up, because I'm going to have this episode come out before some other talks around this subject. And I asked this question numerous times. I want to ask you as well. For somebody who is afraid to start hiring out, or it's just like, oh, I'm so nervous about paying somebody when I'm going to lose that money, what would you say to that?
Good question. I would just say, pick a dollar amount that if it, like let's say it's $50. That's too little. $100 minimum. Your minimum is 100. Pick a dollar amount above 100 that if you lost it today, you would be fine. You'd be like 100% A-okay, nothing happened, like brush it off your shoulder, you're good to go. Pick a dollar amount, whatever that is. It could be small. If you feel really nervous, maybe it's 100. I think the minimum has to be 100 though.
Okay.
Now, just start with that. In the month of February, $100 is what you are using to get help from someone else, to hire someone and get help from them. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. Because you said you would be okay with losing $100 already, right? So my recommendation, let's say video editing, you want to hire a video editor, you maybe go on Upwork or somewhere else. And I'm going to put $100 aside for or video or audio editing. And that's your budget for that for the month of February. Test it out. Try it out with something that's a little bit lower stakes. Like, okay, if your podcast isn't edited perfectly, things aren't going to blow up. If your podcast is a day late, I think things are going to be okay. So pick a lower stakes item so you can test it out. And the goal is for you to start being comfortable giving money to other people to help you do work, allowing that release of trust, allowing that release of energy, which is money, flowing out so that you can get value back. And it's kind of like a test for yourself. You are getting comfortable. You're realizing, wow, I spent $100 and the world didn't come crashing down on my head.
Yeah. Great.
Maybe next month I'll spend $300 or maybe I'll up it to $100 a week. And now you can start putting a little bit more of those slightly higher value tasks. Maybe you hire an illustrator to make graphics for your website. $400 is a great budget for that. You can get some amazing illustrations from someone from Upwork to help you out. And your website will look amazing. So now you're taking those, sorry, I talk with my hands and sometimes hit my microphone.
Yeah, that's all right.
You're taking those baby steps forward and now you're getting more and more comfortable. So instead of jumping in and saying, oh, I'm going to invest $5,000, if you don't feel comfortable with that, start small.
That's great. Well, if it makes you feel any better, Avani, the other two guests I have coming up echoed that exact same thought. Start small. And I know for me personally, I was thinking back to when I first delegated a website design. I was nervous for sure because the OCD in me and I had things done my way and everything, but I tried best I could to empower my then designer, Jonathan, who took over all the design after a little while. And I remember waking up the next day and then realizing that he had like half the project done while I slept because he was in Australia. So he was working. And then the next day I woke up, it was like the first time where I woke up, I was like, oh my God, I went to sleep and didn't work. And a project is like half done. This is amazing. It really set off that, I don't know what the research is or the science behind it, but like the endorphins and the energy you get, something gets done and you don't do everything. That is key. And I think what you're hitting on is a good point too, because it's not like we're saying everybody needs to have a multi-million-dollar agency and you have to become this big CEO person. No, that's not what we're saying. It's you can absolutely stay small, but get rid of the things that you don't want to do, that you hate doing, or you're just not suited for, or that need to go, which is huge. So I love that. And I'll definitely echo that sentiment of start small. And I never thought about it like that, but having a dollar amount that you could get rid of that isn't going to break the bank or make you too nervous. I love that concept. Well done. That's great.
And just to follow up, when the first time I experienced that, I wanted to cry. It was so amazing because I finally saw how much I could do by getting other people to help me out, not trying to do it by myself, not trying to hold it together. And one of the biggest mindset shifts I made, actually just the last year, is allowing myself to trust my team, trust other people who I've hired to help me out, to do their job, know that I have done a good job picking these people. And if you want to know how to pick them, you should listen to our last episode together.
Yeah. I knew we'd be referencing episode 84 because that will come into play big time here.
Trust that you've done a good job choosing those people to work with and let them do their thing. If you give people the space to shine, they will absolutely shine. They will blow you out of the water. They will wow you. And you'll just be like, how did this happen? I am now empowered to do even more, to grow the business more so that they can continue to have work so that maybe you can even pay them more. Like the best feeling ever is to say, hey, our business grew so much this year and you've done such an amazing job. I want to pay you more. Like imagine how good that feels because you're so comfortable. You're such a good place financially. And now you can let your team reap those rewards as well. That's amazing.
Great. There are a lot of hidden benefits to scaling apart from just profit and numbers and the stuff that you might think of. There's a lot of aspects that are very rewarding. I totally echo that because you see somebody's journey progress. A lot of people, they're thrilled to get work and they get an opportunity. And then when you see them excel, then I know for me too, I learned a lot from the people I hired. Now I'm hiring people that are better than I am at a lot of these areas. Like it's my podcast editor who's going to be taking this over. He's just way better at audio and video than I am. So I'm going to learn a lot from him, I know. And I learned a lot from designers I've worked with and coders. So there's that. And there's also a sense of not being alone, which I think is more important than ever.
Yes.
Have you felt that as well? Like, did you feel like once you scaled, it wasn't all on your shoulders? You could share the load a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. Can be lonely when you're running a business by yourself. You can minimize that by getting friends or business besties who you hang out with and talk to, like hang out with virtually and talk to. But it's still not the same as just knowing that there's someone else you could be like, oh my gosh, this project, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh yeah, me too. I feel that way too. But also this, and you're just not alone anymore. And that's it's a priceless feeling.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah. So that's great. So we've covered some good stuff so far. I would like to talk about, did you have something else?
I want to say one thing. So you were talking earlier about, some people may want to keep their business small, but just give themselves some more time back. And there's also some people who do want to scale to multiple six figures, multiple six figures and beyond. And so for that person, I highly recommend in that little chart or matrix that I talked about, not only, and you touched on this too, Josh, earlier, not only should you say, how much do I enjoy this, but also how much does this need me? Because at some point, like you said, you're going to have to hand this video editing or podcast editing or designing, blah, 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 off to somebody. And how much does it actually need you? Most of the times, tasks or activities need us less than we think. So I used to always think that, designing a full app needed me because, I'm so good at this. I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. I know exactly how to do that. I'm quick. I can get in and out. And then I realized, but I can train someone. There are other people out there who are actually better than me at this. And the moment I realized that this actually doesn't need me a lot, now that work, that activity is now something I can outsource as well. Yeah. And you can definitely find people out there who are better than you. I mean, that's great.
I think there is a lot of, there's a lot of value in writing down the tasks that only you can do or that only you could do for your business, because you just said it. There are often, typically always, people who can do a better job at a lot of this stuff that can be repeated or is more task driven. And I definitely think you have to swallow some pride and you have to get over the perfectionist that all designers face. That's a biggie. Again, I just think that web designers and designers have it much harder than the average industry because we could do the stuff. We're good at doing the tech stuff or the figuring out, the figuring out hat that we have on stuff, which again can be very crippling because we can hold on to that stuff. But yeah, getting that time back. I mean, I was even thinking, so I really push, again, my students to work between 30 to 35 hours a week max. I really feel like you don't need to go beyond that. And let's say a task takes 3 hours a week and you're crushing it and you're only doing 30. That's 10% of your week. That's 40%. That's in a month, that would still be 10%, but that's a lot of time. And if you could have an extra 10% to invest in something else, and to have a little more headspace, that's really, I think, the key to scaling and some of the benefits is that time, which is our most valuable asset.
Yeah. It's really, really cool when you can zoom out and look at it like that and see how much you can get back and extend your energy in other ways.
Yeah. Now, I would love to ask you about, so we talked about, if you're afraid to start hiring and stuff, but For you, Avani, you're pretty experienced with building teams, and we don't need to get into hiring. I think we covered that very in depth in episode 84, but were there any setbacks or troubles with scaling that you found? Did you ever have any experiences where some areas of the business that you scaled did not go well that you learned from, or that you would maybe go back and do again? I don't often like to focus on negative stuff, but I do think it's worthwhile looking at lessons learned. Like for me, practically, I know when I started scaling the design and development aspect of my business, I did a pretty good job at laying out how I design and how I code. But one thing I didn't really have in place is like a standard operating procedure for the design. I had my courses at the time, which my subs went through, but there was a lot of things that I realized I should have documented this first. Even though it would take some time, they could have at least followed something. Have you ever experienced anything like that you learned from when it came to scaling that was like, wow, I wish I would have done that differently?
Yeah. Honestly, I wish I would have done it sooner. I mean, I did start scaling pretty quickly because I hit a snag in like one of my first projects. Like, I can't do this development. Like, who do I think I am sitting up at 11 p.m. trying to figure out what went wrong with that plugin on WordPress? So like immediately I outsourced that. But I wish I did even more sooner. Like I wish I outsourced design sooner. I come from a design background. I've worked in-house as a designer for different companies. I should have done that sooner. I remember just working on things. I do love design, but then there's some design that's very grueling. It's very like, there's different types of designing. And I remember just feeling like I was spending my time on this and not able to spend my time on other things. Like the creativity levels are different when you're designing different things. And we design a lot of apps, a lot of B2B products, things like B2C products. So I remember feeling that way. And I wish I outsourced a design sooner in order to extend my time, do other things. Similar to you, we've started documenting our processes probably a year and a half ago. So maybe two and a half years into the business. So we've been doing that, and we have an entire design playbook now that we just created because we're shifting our offerings a little bit. So I'm glad we're doing that. I'm trying to think of other things. And we haven't had any. The thing is, I know that when you're scaling, things will go wrong. They'll always go wrong here and there. And it's just but
they'll go wrong if you do it yourself too.
Yeah. It's always, whether you do it or yourself or you scale, things are just going to happen and you're just going to have to work through them. And we've just realized, just like you're designing a website, just like you design a product, you come across kinks, but then you figure out, okay, is this a bug? Did I do something else wrong? Like foundational thing? Do I need to rework that? Do I need to go back to the code, blah, blah, blah? Do I need to do that? So if you approach your business in that way and just take a look at it experimentally, you don't have to attach feeling or emotion to it as much, and which is hard to do, especially because like when you're a solopreneur, it's almost like I'm the business is me. So I can understand that, but viewing it a little experimentally helps you make those bumps in the road feel a little bit less bumpy.
You know, I was thinking too, when we were talking about documenting stuff and creating some sort of SOP, a standard operating procedure, I did not realize how much I was doing in all areas of my business, but I'll just use the podcast as an example. I know it's quite a bit of work when I was doing the podcast all by myself, because I do have a VA now who's been with me for a while. She does all the transcriptions and outlines and publishing and everything. I did all of that in the beginning. I did, export the episode, did all the editing, made the graphics, and did all the post-production and posting and stuff. And it wasn't until I listed it out that I realized, oh my God, there's a lot of work. I mean, it doesn't often, take that long, but there's still a lot of tasks. And even with editing, I'm creating that all right now, getting ready to hand off the editing. Actually, side note, this is going to be the first episode, Nathan, my editor, is going to edit. So that's kind of coincidence. So we talked about scaling. Well, yeah, there you go. We're talking about scaling. This is the first one, but I'm making all of those processes right now to really write them out. And it's amazing how much you don't realize you do until you hire it out. So I think that's it's also freeing. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do this every week. That's amazing. Yeah, I would like to ask you, because we've talked a lot about good principles with scaling. There is a big difference with scaling certain tasks. And what I mean by that is you talked about designer development. Those are often some of the first things you can delegate if you're running a business. Now, one area that's tricky is sales and marketing. I feel like that's a whole nother ball game delegating it, because a lot of designers, if they get to their point where they become a business owner, which is the path that I took and that most designers take, is you just become a web designer, then you're a freelancer, then you're running your own business, you're a solopreneur, then you start to, offboard a lot of design and dev and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, wow, you're a business owner and you think, I'm still going to do all the sales and all the marketing. What would you say to that? More importantly, how do you scale that end of the business?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's what I've been doing as my primary job for the last year and a half or so. I would say between 1 to 2 years. And I thought that, how can I ever scale this, scale and outsource, especially outsource sales? It's like, I know it. It's in my, it's everything that I know inside of me, and I can just do it like this. How can anyone else ever do that? I had to really drop that attitude last year, especially because if we are scaling to $1 million business and beyond, no way will I be able to make all the sales that need to be made. Yeah. I mean, possible. It's possible for $1 million business, I think, actually, because we are having bigger ticket items. However, there is a point in this year where I will have to make that switch.
I'm sure it depends on the business type too. I still technically do all the sales for my brand, but shocker, it's a personal brand. So it's going to be hard to, there's somewhere I could potentially have affiliate stuff, but I'm going to, but I can do things at scale now. As a web design agency, you can become an authority and do free resources and stuff, but there's still going to be a lot of boots on the ground, meeting with clients, calls that literally, if you're one person doing that and you're going to scale to high six figures or even lower six figures, that's a full-time job right there.
Absolutely. So I want to share a little bit about what I am doing right now. So currently I am doing all the sales. However, I've outsourced the marketing. And I want to I also took me 3 months to I had the idea, and then it took me forever to pull the trigger, because I was like, what if it doesn't work out? And what'll people think? And when I reach out to so this isn't an outbound marketing effort. We get so many referrals, so many great inbound leads. We have, I outsourced SEO. So we optimized our website last quarter. So we're getting a lot of great inbound leads. And what we didn't have it was just me, and it wasn't really great because I didn't have as much time. We didn't have a good outbound marketing engine. So in marketing, when you are trying to get leads, you can have leads come to you, which is inbound, and you can go out and reach out to people, which is outbound marketing. In order to scale the way we need to scale, we cannot just rely on our referrals. So, although our referrals are amazing, we want to, when you're scaling, one of the things that is going to change how you grow is the number of leads that you get, so that you can get on sales calls. So that's why we started an outbound marketing effort, where initially what I used to do research, find people I wanted to work with, craft special emails, and have a really customized way of reaching out to them and talking to them and make a connection. I'm sure I talk about this in one of my podcast episodes, but we used to do something where we'd give them an example of how we might work with them. There's all these things that I used to do, and it used to take some time for me to do that. So I was only able to do a couple a day. And I didn't do it most days. If you did a couple a day, 5 days a week, which I was able to do 3 years ago, not a year ago. Yeah. So I was running out of time in my day, so then you have to prioritize. So what I did last quarter, Q4 of 2020, took all of that outbound marketing effort, bundled it into a process, like you were saying, exactly that. We use ClickUp as a project management system, and it is game changing because it's so customizable. I created a ClickUp section where I have a board, and I have a team member who's a marketing assistant who does this for me. She knows our criteria for clients. She goes out, does the research. She finds who we should reach out to. She puts it in our ClickUp as a new row, reach out to Mr. SpongeBob SquarePants, who does this and this and this. And then that comes into my queue as an approve or reject. Is this actually a good client for us to reach out to? Yes or no. I will approve or reject it. That will also be eventually outsourced because I don't need to do that. but I'm doing it right now because we're getting our process down. As soon as I approve it, she then drafts an email. She already has a bunch of templates. She drafts it. I'm not even reviewing it anymore. We have someone else on the team reviewing that draft. We have some things we put into that email as attachments. Then she sends it out. So this process we started getting going in early January. We've been doing it. We started with 5 messages a week. Now we're up to almost 20. We've been getting a couple of responses every week. So this is an effort that we're growing, and you can see, obviously I'm doing it right now. So I can't say like, oh, I've gotten 5 clients from it, but we will. So we're scaling this process that I used to do once upon a time on my own. And so that's our marketing efforts. And we get our inbound marketing by just like being awesome. So people love to work with us. They tell other people about us. So marketing is completely off of my plate now, except for that one little review task that I talked about. The moment that individual is ready for a sales call, they come into my board. And I'm the sales team right now. It will be the sales team, other people on the sales team, but it comes into my board and I set up a call with them and I go through the process that I have on my sales board. So this is all in a project management system. Eventually what I'm doing on a sales call, the emails like, hey, nice to meet you. Let's set up a time. And hi, let's talk about what it is you want to do. All that stuff. I'm going to be standardizing that process, helping someone learn about how to then use that process to then sell. So
beautiful.
That's what marketing and sales could look like.
Well said. That's great. And the other aspect that kind of goes beyond that really I never thought that I would ever feel comfortable with is project management and client management when it comes to your team, talking with clients. Like, of course, I started scaling at the beginning of 2018, and Jonathan, my guy who did the design, I got to a point where I was finding myself just playing middleman. And I was just relaying messages from him to the client. And then I realized, all right, this is not going to cut it. So what I did though, and what was really cool, and hopefully this is encouragement for everybody, is I never had any standard operating procedure for that or anything. But what I did was I let Jonathan see how I talked to customers and clients. And what was cool was when I had him just give it a go, at some point you got to put some trust in somebody if you feel comfortable with them. He did really good at first, and then he got better and better and better. And then I noticed he started talking like me, which was really cool. It was like the core vision or whatever you want to call it for a company. In a weird way, like I just saw him kind of talking like I did. And I always encourage people to be themselves. But I think what you're talking about there is having some scripts, having some templates, or at least having like some, I guess we'll call buzzwords or things that how you would like the company to come across. Those are great to put into place because your team can use that. And then even though they don't, I'm not going to talk exactly like Avani, I can at least know, okay, this is the parameters that we generally want to talk in. So I think that's a great way to go too, for whether it's sales, marketing, or the next step with project management. At least I found that to be really key.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Getting like an account manager, or project manager to help move things along. We actually haven't done that yet because that's kind of rolled up in our designers roles, but really, really helpful to have someone so then you don't have to check in every few hours on things or even every day on things.
Now, what about offboarding? Because we've talked a lot about the team, processes, the scaling, sales, marketing, some project management, but offboarding, I always took that on myself, but had I not had this personal brand and what I do now, I absolutely would have really taken the agency to a whole nother level and had that all standardized. What have you learned in that regard for offboarding and then following up? Like, do you create processes that your team is going to follow for, certain people to reach out to certain clients or follow up, or do you automate that? Yeah, I'm be curious to see what's worked for you with scaling that in, because that's often the area of business that people neglect and forget about is once you get a project done, don't just leave your client in the dust, but make their offboarding experience amazing, get testimonials, get reviews, and then more importantly, what's the game plan for following up? So how do you scale that in?
So great question. We actually just implemented some SOPs for this, and we've written it all out in our playbook, which is really exciting. So when a project is complete, a designer will know that the lead designer on the project will know the project is complete when it's complete. Usually I have a pulse on the project anyway throughout the project. If things are delayed or anything like that, we'll know that. When the project is complete, that kicks off a task with a bunch of subtasks on things to do to close the project, which includes closing the ClickUp project in our project management system, closing the Slack channel, closing out. For me, they send me a message right now, me or our finance person, a message that, hey, it's time to send the final invoice. And so we do that. And then the last thing is a bunch of handoff or follow-up pieces. So if we work in Figma, we do designs in Figma. We actually created a template to hand off. It's like a handoff document. And it's like the deliverables, the final things I give to a person and make sure they know where everything is, because inevitably someone will be like, hey, where are the logos? And you're like, oh, I sent you an email with the logos, and you have to like resend an email, which feels really silly. And they might still do that, by the way. But what we've realized is that if they're going to do that anyway, let's make it easy on us, first of all. And what we've done is we created a designed out page Figma is a tool for designing UI. So it looks like UI. It has like, here are your logo files, click here. And we link that to the Google Drive folder of the logo files. Here's your designs, click here. Here are your brand guidelines, click here. So it's just like a page that we've designed for them, customized with their logo, their name, our logo, that we send them as a link. Here's your handoff document. Everything you need from what we did together is here.
That's great.
So that's one piece we do for our offboarding. And the second thing we do is we do a testimonial request. We have a form for this as well that's connected to ClickUp. And what we do is we send this out a week or so after the project has ended, saying, hey, we loved working with you. We'd love a 2 to 3 sentence testimonial. We'd also love to hear your feedback. How was it working with us? Do you have any constructive feedback, anything you loved or hated? So getting that input as well, because we're designers. We like to think like designers. We always want to improve our process. So we have that also. And then that's kind of where things cut off right now. In terms of re-engaging or keeping in touch, I do that on my end. I do like a yearly Happy New Year email where I give everyone free coffee for an entire week, which if you're curious, we can talk about that. But I do like here and there send out things to continue to let people know that, hi, we exist. Keep us top of mind. We love you. You love us. Don't forget that.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love that. And I love the playbook stuff you talked about. And I also love that document, the handoff document for clients with links to everything. That's crucial. Yeah. We've experimented with a couple different things with that, because inevitably, clients are always going to respond back, 6 months later and be like, hey, didn't you send me my logo? So that's awesome. We had actually experimented.
Forward the email you sent them.
Yes. We had actually experimented with having an assets page on every website build that just has all their stuff on it. So they can which they would forget about it anyway, but you could just say, yep, just go to your site /assets or whatever. So it's always an option as well. And I just want to make sure everyone knows, listening to this, designers, those of you who have been through my business course, this is all laid out for you. So you don't need to come up with all the tasks. I basically have everything there, and then you can take the tasks, whether it's my business course or some of my other, like my process course, and you can use that to decide what to delegate. So I want to make sure I don't overwhelm everybody thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to make all this up. No, follow a proven path. Even if it's not me, follow a proven path with somebody who's done the business, and then you can make it your own and delegate it. So, wow, this has been awesome, Avani. I felt pretty good about what we covered. I think we've covered a lot of the reasons why you want to scale, the different mindsets that people might have, some of the reasons you might want, we've kind of hung on to it or delayed on it. But I love the idea of listing out what you do in a week or maybe a couple weeks, depending on the type of work you do. Really getting a good feel of those tasks, see which ones are high level versus low level. And then I love the columns you mentioned about like 0 to 10. What do you hate doing? What are you good at? What do you know needs to go? And I felt like we did a good job of covering scaling the sales and marketing, but then also project management and some of the offboarding stuff. So this was great. I was just looking at my list of questions, and I think we've covered everything that I wanted to hit. Last thing for you, do you have any final thoughts for somebody who is listening to this? they're pumped, they're ready to scale, but they might just need a nudge. What would be the final thought that would just make them want to go, all right, let's do this?
Start right now. Start today, because every single day that you put off scaling, put off just putting in $100 investment to hire someone to extend your time, every single day that you do that, you're leaving money on the table. Not just like a couple dollars on the table. You are leaving a pile of $100 bills on the table. Like not a small pile, like a large pile,
Yeah.
$100 bills on the table. And that is value you could be creating for other people. It's not just money. It's value you could be creating for other people, but it's also money you could be bringing into your business to then pay other very good people good money. You know, we're doing this to add value to the world, have an increase in our quality of life, and live our lives the way we want to live them. So the longer you procrastinate it, the longer you're just procrastinating the life you want to live. So it's up to you, but start now.
Well said. I mean, I don't know a better way to end than that, Avani. That was awesome. That was great. And I apologize if you hear my golden retriever at my door scratching. She's dying for her afternoon walk here. So, man, that was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on again. I'm super excited for you, even just from when we talked a couple months ago, to see what you've done already. And I have no doubt that you're going to hit your goals this year with the scaling stuff you have going on. So,
thank you.
Man, this was cool. Thanks so much for coming back on and sharing the goods.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
All right, talk soon.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.